My name is Andres Wilson, and at 70 years old, I never thought my own family would betray me. That crisp November evening, just 3 days before Thanksgiving, changed everything. Walking past my son's bedroom, I froze hearing those words. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the nursing home. My heart shattered. But what they didn't know was that I'd been recording their scheme for months. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if family loyalty matters to you. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After losing my wife Margaret to cancer 5 years ago, I found myself adrift in our family home of 35 years. The silence was deafening. Every corner held memories of our life together, from raising our only son Thomas to planning our retirement that we never got to fully enjoy together. I had a good life, professionally speaking. My career as a civil engineer brought us financial stability and respect in our community. I designed bridges and infrastructure across 3 states, and even after retirement at 65, occasional consulting work kept my mind sharp. But without Margaret, the purpose seemed to drain from my days. It was Thomas who suggested I move in with his family. "Dad, that house is too big for you alone," he said during one of his weekend visits. "We have plenty of space, and the grandkids would love having you around." At 42, my son had built a successful career in financial management. He wasn't as hands-on as I had been in my profession, but he wore expensive suits and talked about client portfolios with the confidence of someone who knew his field. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, seemed supportive of the idea. "We insist, Andres," she said with a warm smile. At 39, Sarah worked part-time as an interior designer, though most of her energy went into maintaining their image of suburban perfection. "The guest suite has its own bathroom, and you'll have plenty of privacy when you want it." My grandchildren's excitement sealed the deal. Jason, my 14-year-old grandson, immediately started talking about all the model planes we could build together. "And you can help me with math, Grandpa. Dad's always too busy." Lily, just 10, and the spitting image of her grandmother, hugged me tightly. "Please come live with us, Grandpa. I want to show you my piano recitals." Their home in Westbrook, Pennsylvania, was everything a family could want. 4 bedrooms, a spacious yard, and a neighborhood with tree-lined streets where children still played outdoors. My son had done well for himself, though I sometimes wondered if the mortgage and private school tuitions stretched their budget more than they admitted. When I moved in, I insisted on contributing to the household. "I won't be a burden," I told Thomas, writing him a check from my savings. "Consider this my share of the expenses." Between my pension and prudent investments Margaret and I had made, I was comfortable financially. I continued this arrangement, paying what amounted to rent plus extra for utilities and food, though Thomas always seemed reluctant to accept it. Those first months were some of the happiest since Margaret passed. I helped Lily practice her piano lessons, showing her the few chords I knew from my college days. With Jason, I shared engineering principles while we built increasingly complex model structures. Sarah would ask my opinion on her design projects, and Thomas occasionally sought my advice on home repairs, though rarely on financial matters. Our family dinners were lively affairs. I taught the children card games Margaret and I used to play, and Sarah seemed genuinely interested in my stories about major projects I'd worked on. "The Eastland Bridge is still standing because of your calculations? That's incredible, Andres," she'd say, serving second helpings of her admittedly excellent lasagna. But subtle changes began to appear like hairline fractures in concrete. Sarah's smile would sometimes slip when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd cut me off mid-story with an abrupt, "That reminds me," before changing the subject entirely. Thomas started coming home later, citing client meetings that apparently could only happen during dinner hours. I tried not to read too much into these small shifts. Every family has its rhythms and stresses. Thomas mentioned pressure at work, something about market volatility affecting his clients' portfolios. Sarah was taking on more design projects, often spreading fabric swatches across the dining table and frowning at color schemes. As November arrived, talk turned to Thanksgiving plans. "I want to make Margaret's sweet potato casserole," I offered during breakfast one morning, "and maybe her cranberry relish, if I can find her recipe card." "That would be lovely," Sarah said, though she didn't look up from her coffee. My parents will be joining us this year. They're driving up from Florida. I'd met Sarah's parents only a handful of times at family events. They seemed pleasant enough, if a bit preoccupied with appearances. Great, I replied, genuinely pleased at the prospect of a full house for the holiday. I'll make extra. Margaret always said her casserole was better the second day anyway. I began collecting ingredients, looking forward to recreating the tastes of Thanksgivings past. The upcoming holiday gave me purpose, a chance to share Margaret's recipes with a new generation. Little did I know that beneath the surface of our seemingly happy home, plans were being made that would shatter the illusion of family harmony forever. The first real indication that something was wrong came about 2 months after I moved in. Sarah stopped me one morning as I was making coffee. "Andres, could you please remember to turn off lights when you leave rooms? Our electricity bill was outrageous last month." I apologized and made a mental note to be more careful. But similar complaints began to accumulate with increasing frequency. "You left water running in the bathroom sink. The TV volume was so loud it woke Lily up. Did you really need to use so many pots to cook one meal?" Each criticism was delivered with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Thomas would remain silent during these exchanges, suddenly fascinated by whatever mail or newspaper was in front of him. Then I began noticing my belongings weren't where I'd left them. My reading glasses would disappear from the side table where I always placed them, only to be found by Sarah in strange locations, like behind sofa cushions or in kitchen drawers. "You must have put them there and forgotten, Andres," she would say with that same tight smile. One afternoon, I was reading in the garden when Sarah's friend Diane came to visit. Their conversation drifted through the open window above my head. Sarah clearly had no idea I was sitting below. "It's exhausting, Diane. Living with an old man wasn't part of my life plan. He shuffles around all morning, hogging the kitchen when I need to get the kids' lunches ready." "Can't Thomas talk to him?" Diane asked. "Thomas avoids conflict. Always has. But something has to change. This arrangement isn't working." I sat perfectly still, the book forgotten in my lap. Shuffling, I was still fit enough to walk 3 miles most mornings, and I always prepared breakfast for the grandchildren before Sarah even came downstairs. That evening, Thomas brought home some brochures which he left conspicuously on the coffee table. Golden Sunset Village and Peaceful Pines. Senior living featured smiling elderly people playing shuffleboard and doing crafts. When I asked about them, he shrugged casually. "Just thought you might want to look at options, Dad. No pressure. Some of these places have amazing amenities, better than what we can offer here." I nodded slowly, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "I'm pretty happy with our arrangement, son. Unless you feel differently?" "Of course not," he said quickly. Too quickly, just keeping options open. The next troubling incident involved my grandchildren. I offered to help Jason with his science project one weekend, but Sarah intercepted. "Let's not bother Grandpa Jason. He needs his rest." She said this loudly, as if I were hard of hearing rather than standing 3 feet away. "But Grandpa knows all about structural integrity," Jason protested. "That's what my project is on. Your father can help you," Sarah insisted, steering him away. The disappointment on Jason's face mirrored my own. When Sarah's parents visited for a weekend in early November, more puzzle pieces fell into place. Her father, Robert, cornered me while we were alone in the den watching football. "Sarah tells me you've been having some memory issues, Andres." His tone was sympathetic, but his eyes were assessing. "Nothing to be ashamed of at your age. My golf buddy Harold had similar problems. His family found him a wonderful care facility. Best decision they ever made." "My memory is fine," I replied evenly, though my heart was pounding. "Who won the Super Bowl in '84? He looked confused. "How would I know that?" "The Raiders beat the Redskins 27-10, I said. "I remember because Margaret and I hosted a watch party. I remember what she wore, what we ate, and every major play." "My memory isn't the problem here, Robert." He changed the subject, but the damage was done. They were building a narrative about me, one piece at a time. The most alarming discovery came when I opened my bathroom cabinet to find prescription bottles I didn't recognize. One was for memory support, another for age-related cognitive decline. Neither had been prescribed by my doctor, and I had certainly never taken them. They were props in a performance designed to convince others, and perhaps even me, that I was declining. Later that week, I went looking for my will and financial documents, which I'd kept in a folder in my desk drawer. They weren't there. After a thorough search of my room, I found them in Thomas's home office, alongside bank statements from my personal accounts that should have been mailed directly to me. The whispering became constant. Thomas and Sarah would be talking in normal tones until I entered a room. Then their voices would drop to unintelligible murmurs. If I asked what they were discussing, the answer was always nothing important or just work stuff. I began to feel like a ghost in their home, present but not acknowledged except as a problem to be managed. The warmth that had characterized my early days with them evaporated, leaving behind a chill of suspicion and unspoken intentions. Still, I clung to hope that I was misreading the situation. Perhaps they were planning a surprise for my upcoming birthday. Maybe Thomas was concerned about his job and didn't want to worry me. I created explanations that allowed me to maintain my dignity and trust in my family. But deep down, in the place where truth resides, even when we try to deny it, I knew something was very wrong, and I needed to find out what before it was too late. After finding my financial documents in Thomas's office, I knew I needed to pay closer attention. I replaced them exactly as I found them and began watching more carefully. The next day, I discovered a power of attorney form in Thomas's printer tray with blank spaces where my signature would go. It granted him complete control over my medical and financial decisions. I photographed it with my phone and put it back. No one knew that despite my age, I was quite comfortable with technology. Before retiring, I'd managed complex computer modeling systems for infrastructure projects. A smartphone held no mysteries for me. The conversations I partially overheard became more troubling. Standing in the hallway outside Thomas's home office, I caught fragments that chilled me. "The account needs his signature, unless we have power of attorney," Thomas said. Sarah's voice was lower but distinct. "Dr. Maxwell said he could help with the competency evaluation if we're concerned about his decision-making." I'd never met any Dr. Maxwell. My personal physician, Dr. Rivera, had given me a clean bill of health just 2 months earlier, noting that I was remarkably fit for a man of 70. Sarah began testing me in subtle ways. She would ask if I remembered conversations that never happened, then exchange worried glances with Thomas when I said I didn't. "See, it's happening more frequently," she'd say, as if continuing an ongoing discussion about my mental decline. "Dad, we scheduled an appointment with a specialist for next Tuesday," Thomas announced over breakfast one morning. "What kind of specialist?" I asked, though I already suspected. "Just a checkup. Routine for someone your age." "Interesting. I already had my annual physical with Dr. Rivera last month. Did you cancel that one and schedule this instead?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "This is different. More comprehensive. Then I'd like to speak to this doctor beforehand to understand what tests they're planning." "I'll handle it, Dad. You don't need to worry about the details." But I was definitely worried about the details, especially when I found nursing home brochures tucked under the seat in Thomas's car while looking for my dropped reading glasses. Not the glossy ones he'd left out for show, but detailed pricing sheets and admission procedures for Golden Sunset Village. Notes in Thomas's handwriting calculated how much of my monthly pension would go to the facility, with the remainder neatly allocated to household expenses. My hands shook as I photographed these documents too. The betrayal was no longer ambiguous. It had numbers attached to it. More unsettling was overhearing Sarah talking to our neighbor while they thought I was napping on the porch. "It's been so challenging," she said, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "Andres is declining rapidly. Some days he doesn't even recognize the children." This was an outright lie. I had never, not once, failed to recognize Jason and Lily. The fabrication was so bold it took my breath away. That evening, I drove to a local electronics store and purchased a small digital recording device with my rarely used credit card. The clerk raised an eyebrow when I asked detailed questions about sound quality and storage capacity, clearly not expecting such technical knowledge from someone my age. "My grandson is interviewing veterans for a school project," I explained smoothly. "I want to make sure their stories are preserved clearly." Back in my room, I tested the device, verifying the sound quality and figuring out how to transfer files to my password-protected phone. Then I placed it strategically in the living room bookshelf, hidden behind family photos but with a clear line to where Thomas and Sarah usually sat after the children went to bed. I placed a second device I'd purchased under the dining table, securing it with putty to the underside where no one would notice during normal cleaning. Both had enough memory and battery life to record for 12 hours before needing to be retrieved. For the next week, I developed a system. Each morning, while everyone was busy with breakfast preparations and getting ready for school and work, I would retrieve one device, download its contents to my phone, clear its memory, recharge it if necessary, and replace it with the freshly charged second device. In the evening, I would switch them again, ensuring continuous coverage of their conversations. During quiet afternoons, I would listen to the recordings using earbuds, methodically documenting anything concerning. My engineering background served me well, as I created organized files and notes, cataloging dates, times, and specific statements. What I heard confirmed my worst fears and revealed new ones. Thomas was in financial trouble. His investment firm had lost several major clients, and he had made some poorly timed stock market plays with their own savings. "We're underwater on the second mortgage," he told Sarah during one late-night conversation. "And the credit card debt is almost maxed out. What about your father's retirement account? He's got at least $600,000 there. I can't access it without his consent. Not unless we have guardianship, which we'd get if he's declared incompetent or unable to manage his affairs," Sarah said thoughtfully. The nursing home social worker said that's pretty routine for families in our situation. In another recording, they discussed my deceased wife's jewelry, which I had carefully stored to give to Lily when she was older. The diamonds alone would cover the back taxes, Thomas calculated. And he never looks in that safe anymore. Does he even remember the combination? Sarah wondered. I found it written in his address book, under Margaret's birthday. That night, I quietly moved Margaret's jewelry from our family safe to a new safe deposit box at a bank Thomas didn't know I used. I also called my bank and added verbal passwords to all my accounts, explicitly noting that no one, including family members, should be given information without those passwords. The recordings hadn't yet captured them explicitly stating their full plan, but the direction was clear. They were preparing to declare me incompetent, gain control of my finances, and place me in a nursing home, all to solve Thomas's self-created financial problems. The betrayal was methodical and calculated. Each piece of evidence of my decline was manufactured to support their narrative. Each concern about my welfare masked their true intentions, and all while continuing to accept my monthly contributions to their household expenses. But they had underestimated me. They saw gray hair and assumed diminished capacity. They heard stories of the past and assumed I was stuck there. Their greatest mistake was believing I wouldn't fight for my dignity, my independence, and the future I had worked so hard to secure. The final confirmation was still to come, but I was already preparing my response, not out of vengeance, but out of self-preservation, and perhaps to teach them a lesson about respecting their elders that they would never forget. As Thanksgiving approached, I threw myself into preparations, partly to maintain appearances and partly because cooking had always been therapeutic for me. I ordered a fresh 20-pound turkey from the local butcher and gathered ingredients for all of Margaret's traditional recipes: the sweet potato casserole with maple and pecans, her special corn pudding, the cranberry relish with orange zest that took 3 days to properly mature in the refrigerator. Throughout my cooking preparations, Sarah hovered uncomfortably, offering unnecessary suggestions and watching me use sharp knives with poorly disguised concern. "Are you sure you can manage all this, Andres? It's a lot of work. I've been making Thanksgiving dinner since before you were born," I replied pleasantly. "Margaret and I used to host 20 people some years." "Well, things are different now," she murmured, her implication clear. I simply smiled and continued chopping vegetables with the precision that had once drawn compliments from a professional chef friend of ours. Meanwhile, my recordings had revealed a more urgent timeline than I'd initially suspected. Thomas had lost far more money than I realized. During a particularly heated late-night argument, he finally admitted the full extent to Sarah. "I didn't just lose our investment," he confessed, voice cracking with stress. I borrowed against my client's accounts. If they audit before I can replace it, I could face criminal charges. Jesus. Thomas. How much? Almost 200,000. Sarah's gasp was audible even on the recording. How could you be so stupid? Where are we going to get that kind of money? A long pause followed before Thomas spoke again. Dad's retirement account would cover it. The emergency withdrawal penalty is steep, but still better than prison. And how exactly do you plan to get access? He's not just going to hand it over. That's why we need to move forward with the nursing home plan now. Once we have guardianship, the recording continued with them discussing specific nursing homes, weighing costs against how much control they would have over my finances. They settled on Golden Sunset Village because it had a memory care unit that would restrict my ability to make phone calls or receive visitors without their approval. The facility required patients to surrender control of their finances to their guardian as part of the admission process. I sat in my room, earbuds in, listening to my son and his wife discuss my future as if I were already gone. My hands shook as I labeled this recording Evidence 17 and saved it to multiple secure locations. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret, wondering if she could see what our son had become. We had raised him with such care, teaching him about honesty and responsibility. Where had we gone wrong? Around 11:30, I got up to get some water. As I passed Thomas and Sarah's bedroom, I heard their voices through the partially open door. I stopped, not needing my recording device to hear their words clearly. "We should tell him after dinner on Thanksgiving," Sarah was saying. "That way your parents will have gone home, and he'll have had one last nice family holiday." "I don't know." Thomas sounded hesitant. "Maybe we could wait until after Christmas?" "We can't afford to wait that long, Thomas. The bank called again today, and you said yourself your compliance officer is asking questions." I know. A heavy sigh. "So what do we tell him?" "That we found a wonderful place where he'll get the care he needs. That we're concerned about his safety living here. That it's just a temporary arrangement while we renovate the house to be more senior-friendly." He's not going to believe that. He doesn't need to believe it. He just needs to go. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the nursing home. I've already scheduled the intake for Friday morning. They think he's visiting, but once he's there, the doctor will do an evaluation. With what we've told them about his condition, they won't let him leave on his own. What if he refuses to go? That's why I got the doctor to prescribe those sedatives. We'll tell him they're for anxiety about the visit. Once we have guardianship, it won't matter what he wants. The coldness in Sarah's voice froze me in place. This wasn't just financial desperation. There was calculation here, and a willingness to drug me into compliance that revealed a disturbing lack of moral boundaries. My legs nearly buckled beneath me. I reached out to steady myself against the wall, careful not to make a sound. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid they might hear it through the door. The betrayal was complete and undeniable. For a moment, I considered bursting into their room, confronting them with what I'd heard. The rage building inside me demanded expression. But the strategist in me, the engineer who had spent decades solving complex problems, knew that an emotional confrontation now would only give them time to accelerate their plans or create new ones. I quietly returned to my room, my mind racing through options. Should I leave immediately? Call the police? What evidence did I have that would stand up to their inevitable denials? Sleep was impossible now. I spent the night reviewing all the recordings I'd gathered, organizing my evidence, and forming a plan. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next 2 days before Thanksgiving would be crucial, and the holiday itself would be very different from what Thomas and Sarah were expecting. As I finally lay down as dawn broke, one thought gave me both pain and resolve. They had forgotten the most important lesson I'd tried to teach Thomas as a child. Never underestimate someone just because they have gray hair. Age brings wisdom, and wisdom brings patience. And sometimes, patience brings justice. The morning after overhearing their definitive plan, I called my old friend and former colleague, Jack Peterson, now a retired attorney who specialized in elder law. I'd already consulted him casually about my situation, but now I needed specific guidance. "Jack, things have escalated," I explained after driving to a coffee shop 10 miles away to make the call. They're planning to take me to a nursing home the day after Thanksgiving, under false pretenses, with the intention of having me declared incompetent and gaining guardianship. Jack's normally jovial voice turned serious. Do you have proof of this plan, Andres? I have recordings. Multiple conversations where they explicitly discuss taking control of my finances and using sedatives to ensure my compliance. Is Pennsylvania a two-party consent state for recordings? He asked, ever the attorney. One party. I checked before I started recording, and these were conversations in common areas of the home where there's no expectation of privacy. Good man. Still thinking like an engineer, covering all contingencies. His tone shifted to action mode. Here's what we need to do immediately. First, secure all your important documents and valuables outside their reach. Second, contact your financial institutions and add additional security protocols. Third, get a current medical evaluation from your own doctor documenting your competence. I spent the next hour outlining my complete strategy with Jack, who agreed to represent me if needed. He recommended a specific bank where I could establish new accounts and a safe deposit box large enough for all my critical documents. What about Thanksgiving? I asked. Should I confront them then, or simply not show up? Jack was thoughtful. That depends on what you want the outcome to be, Andres. Do you want to maintain any relationship with your son after this? The question struck me deeply. Despite everything, Thomas was still my only child, my last connection to Margaret. I want him to face consequences for his actions, but not destroy him completely, I admitted. And I want to protect my relationship with my grandchildren. Then, a private confrontation with evidence might be best. Give him a chance to make amends before involving authorities. But be prepared for denial and anger. People caught in financial fraud rarely admit fault immediately. After our call, I systematically executed my protection plan. At my bank, I spoke with the manager about suspicious activity on my accounts. She confirmed that Thomas had indeed attempted to access my retirement funds twice in the past month, claiming to be acting on my behalf. He had a copy of your power of attorney document, she explained, but it wasn't properly notarized, and our system flagged it because you've never granted anyone POA before. I never signed any power of attorney, I said firmly. That explains it. She nodded. The signature didn't match our records, which triggered our fraud protocols. I immediately moved a significant portion of my funds to the new bank Jack recommended, leaving enough in the original accounts to avoid immediate suspicion. I also added verbal passwords and explicit instructions that no changes could be made without my physical presence and multiple forms of ID. My next stop was my doctor's office. Dr. Rivera, who had been my physician for 15 years, was disturbed by what I shared. I'd be happy to perform a complete cognitive assessment, Andres, she offered. But based on your recent physical and our conversation today, I already have no concerns about your mental competence. The examination she conducted was thorough, including memory tests, problem-solving scenarios, and assessments of my daily living capabilities. At the end, she provided a signed letter stating unequivocally that I was fully competent to manage my own affairs and make my own medical decisions. I'll also make detailed notes in your medical file, she assured me. If anyone tries to challenge this, my documentation will support you. Meanwhile, I continued retrieving and reviewing recordings each day, adding to my already substantial evidence. One particularly damning conversation captured Sarah calling the nursing home to confirm my intake appointment for the day after Thanksgiving. Yes, we'll be bringing him around 10 a.m., she told them. He'll think it's just a tour, but we've discussed the situation with Dr. Maxwell, and he understands we'll be completing admission that day. Yes, we have his medication and insurance information. No, he doesn't have a valid power of attorney, but we're working on getting emergency guardianship based on his declining condition. Yes, I understand the facility requires control of patients' finances. We'll have the necessary documentation. That evening, I noticed Thomas going through my desk drawer while I was supposedly taking a shower. Through a crack in the bathroom door, I watched him photographing my bank statements and Social Security information. My most critical task was creating a comprehensive record of all their plans and actions. I compiled video evidence from around the house, showing me cooking complex meals, helping the grandchildren with homework, and performing household repairs that required precise measurements and careful planning. All clear evidence of my continued competence. Using my laptop, I created a video montage, interspersing these everyday scenes with audio from my recordings. Each clip was carefully time-stamped and labeled. The juxtaposition was powerful. My normal, capable behavior alongside their secret discussions of my supposed decline and their plans to appropriate my finances. I added footage from a hidden camera pen I'd purchased, showing Thomas searching my room when I was out, going through my financial papers, and testing the combination on my now empty safe. The final element was my recent medical evaluation with Dr. Rivera, which I had recorded with her permission. Her professional assessment of my excellent physical and mental health for a man my age provided a stark counterpoint to their manufactured narrative of my decline. As I worked on this project, I maintained a perfectly normal demeanor around the family. I continued Thanksgiving preparations, played chess with Jason, and listened to Lily practice holiday songs on the piano. If Thomas and Sarah noticed anything unusual in my behavior, they gave no indication. The night before Thanksgiving, I finalized my preparations. I transferred my completed video presentation to a USB drive and tested it on the living room television. I packed a suitcase with essential items and placed it in the trunk of my car, parked down the street where they wouldn't notice it. I made sure my new apartment lease was secured in my wallet, along with my new bank cards and the key to my safe deposit box. I spoke with Jack one last time, confirming our plans for the day after Thanksgiving, when I would meet him to complete the legal paperwork, protecting me from any future attempts at guardianship. "Are you sure you want to confront them tomorrow?" he asked. "You could simply not return after leaving for your morning walk." I considered this option again, but ultimately shook my head. They need to know that their actions have consequences, and I need to look my son in the eye when he realizes what he's done. Just remember, no matter how they react, stay calm and factual, Jack advised. You have the law and the evidence on your side. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the holiday ahead. Thanksgiving had always been about gratitude and family. Tomorrow would still be about those things, but in a very different way. I would be grateful for my own strength and resilience, and I would learn which family members were truly deserving of my trust. The engineer in me knew that when a bridge shows structural damage, sometimes the only safe option is to close it completely until repairs can be made. Some damage can be fixed, some requires complete rebuilding. Tomorrow would reveal whether the bridge between my son and me could ever be safely crossed again. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and clear. I rose early, as I always did, and began the final preparations for our meal. The turkey needed to go into the oven by 7 to be ready for our 2 o'clock dinner. The cranberry relish needed a final taste test. Pies needed to be transferred from cooling racks to serving plates. Sarah appeared in the kitchen around 8, looking surprised to find me already deep into my cooking routine. "You're up early," she remarked, pouring herself coffee. "Always am on Thanksgiving," I replied pleasantly. Margaret and I had a system. She always said the secret to a stress-free holiday was preparation and timing. "Well, let me help," Sarah offered with unusual enthusiasm. "What can I do?" "You could set the table with the good china. It's in the dining room cabinet." As she busied herself with plates and silverware, Thomas joined us, dressed casually but in the expensive way that suggested even his relaxed clothes were carefully chosen to project success. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Smells amazing in here." "Your mother's recipes never fail," I replied, noticing how he lingered near me, watching my knife work as I chopped herbs for the stuffing, checking my competence, no doubt. "The grandkids are excited," he continued. "They're still sleeping, but Lily was talking about your famous mashed potatoes last night." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite knowing that his apparent warmth masked his plans for tomorrow morning. Looking forward to spending time with them. Holidays are about family, after all. The morning progressed with an undercurrent of tension beneath the holiday bustle. Sarah's parents arrived around noon, greeting me with exaggerated cheerfulness and exchanging meaningful glances with their daughter when they thought I wasn't looking. "Andres, you've outdone yourself," Sarah's mother exclaimed, surveying the kitchen. "Are you sure you haven't tired yourself out? You really should let Sarah take over now." "I'm fine, Patricia," I assured her, checking the turkey's temperature. "Cooking keeps me young." Jason and Lily bounded into the kitchen, bringing genuine joy amidst the manufactured concern. "Grandpa, can I help with the gravy?" Jason asked. "You promised to show me your no-lumps technique." "Absolutely," I said, making space for him at the stove. "The secret is constant, whisking and adding the flour gradually." Lily hugged me around the waist. "I made you a Thanksgiving card, Grandpa. It has a turkey wearing glasses like yours." These moments of connection with my grandchildren were bittersweet, knowing what their parents were planning. I wondered how Thomas and Sarah would explain my placement in a nursing home to them. What stories would they invent to justify my sudden absence from the children's lives? By 2 o'clock, everything was ready. The dining table looked magnificent with Margaret's heirloom tablecloth, the good china, and centerpiece of fall flowers that Lily and I had arranged that morning. The food was perfectly timed, each dish hot and ready to serve. "Before we eat," I announced as everyone gathered around the table, "I'd like to say how grateful I am to be here with family today. Margaret always said that gratitude should be expressed specifically, so I want to thank each of you." I looked at my grandchildren, Jason and Lily. "Thank you for your enthusiasm and for keeping me young at heart." Their beaming smiles were genuine. "Sarah and Thomas, thank you for opening your home to me this past year." The flicker of discomfort in their expressions was subtle but unmistakable. "And Patricia and Robert, thank you for joining us today." Sarah's parents nodded politely. "Now, let's enjoy this meal together," I concluded, taking my seat at the head of the table. The dinner conversation flowed with holiday pleasantries and compliments on the food. Between serving and eating, I noticed Thomas and Sarah exchanging glances, particularly when Sarah's father made a comment about changes coming soon and how next year might look very different for all of us. After the pumpkin pie was served and coffee poured, I excused myself briefly. "I have a special surprise for everyone," I announced. "I'll be right back." In my room, I collected the USB drive containing my video presentation and took a moment to steady myself. The confrontation ahead would be difficult, but necessary. I touched the photo of Margaret on my nightstand. "Wish me strength, my love," I whispered. When I returned to the dining room, I suggested we move to the living room for coffee. "I have something special I'd like to share with everyone," I explained. Once we were all settled, the grandchildren on the floor with their dessert plates, the adults on sofas and chairs with coffee cups, I approached the television. "I've put together a little family movie," I said casually. "Something to commemorate our time together." Thomas looked puzzled but not alarmed. "That's thoughtful, Dad, but maybe we should save it for later? Mom and Dad are probably tired from their drive." "It won't take long," I assured him, inserting the USB drive into the television's port. "And I think everyone will find it quite interesting." As the screen came to life, I positioned myself where I could clearly see everyone's reactions. The video began innocuously enough, with clips of family moments from the past year. The grandchildren building a snowman with me last winter. A birthday celebration for Lily. Thomas and me working on the backyard fence. Then came the first audio recording. Thomas's voice, clear and unmistakable. "Once we have guardianship, we can liquidate his retirement accounts to cover our debts." Sarah's parents straightened in their seats, exchanging confused glances. Thomas froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Sarah's voice followed. "The nursing home requires control of patients' finances as part of admission. We'll have everything transferred within a week." I continued standing calmly as more recordings played, interspersed with footage showing my obvious competence and independence. Dr. Rivera's professional assessment. Thomas searching my room when I was out. Sarah's face drained of color as her own voice described plans to sedate me for the nursing home visit tomorrow. When the segment about selling Margaret's jewelry to pay their debts played, she actually swayed in her seat, one hand clutching at her throat. "Turn it off," Thomas demanded, rising from his chair. "This is completely out of context." "Is it?" I asked quietly, making no move toward the television. Please explain the correct context for planning to drug your father and place him in a nursing home against his will to access his retirement savings. You don't understand, he began, but his voice faltered as the video continued, now showing him attempting to forge my signature on financial documents. Sarah suddenly stood up, swaying slightly. This isn't. Her eyes rolled back and she collapsed back onto the sofa, having genuinely fainted from shock or shame. The commotion broke the stunned silence. Robert rushed to his daughter while Patricia stared at me in horror. The grandchildren looked bewildered and frightened. Jason, Lily, I said gently, would you please go to your rooms for a little while? The adults need to talk. They hesitated until Thomas nodded sharply. Go. Now. Once they had gone, I stopped the video and turned to face my son directly. I know everything, Thomas. The second mortgage. The money you took from clients. The nursing home scheduled for tomorrow morning. Dad, you don't understand, he began again, his voice desperate now. We're in serious trouble. I made some mistakes. Yes, but I was trying to protect the family. By betraying yours? I asked quietly. By stealing from your own father? Sarah was beginning to revive, her mother fanning her face with a napkin. Her father looked grim, addressing Thomas rather than me. What have you done, Thomas? What is he talking about with client money? Thomas ignored him, focusing on me with growing anger. You were spying on us, recording private conversations in our home. After finding proof you were planning to have me declared incompetent. Yes, I protected myself, I replied calmly. The law permits recording conversations in common areas, where there's no expectation of privacy, particularly when documenting potential criminal activity. Sarah, now conscious but still pale, spoke in a trembling voice. What are you going to do? That depends, I said, taking my seat again. I've already secured my finances and important documents. I've documented my mental competence with medical professionals, and I've retained legal counsel, who is prepared to pursue elder abuse charges if necessary. Thomas blanched at this. Elder abuse? That's ridiculous. We were concerned about your welfare. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Is that why you were researching how to cash out my retirement accounts? Why Sarah called the nursing home to confirm they would take control of my finances upon admission? Why you searched my room and attempted to access my bank accounts without my knowledge? Sarah's parents were staring at their daughter and son-in-law with growing horror. Is this true? Patricia asked. Were you planning to put Andres in a home just for his money? Neither Thomas nor Sarah answered, their silence damning. As I said, what happens next depends on your choices now. I continued steadily. I'm moving out tonight. I've leased an apartment in Millfield Seniors Community. It's independent living, with my own kitchen, my own schedule, and my own front door key. Thomas looked up sharply. You're leaving? Just like that? I think we both know I can't stay here, I replied. Not after this. What about the grandchildren? Sarah asked, finding her voice again. I hope to maintain my relationship with them, I said firmly. That's partly up to you. How you explain this situation to them. What you tell them about why I've moved. And the recordings? Thomas asked, his expression calculating even now. What happens to those? They stay secure with my attorney, I said. Whether they ever become part of a legal proceeding depends on your next actions. If you seek help for your financial issues, take responsibility for your actions, and respect my independence going forward. Perhaps we can avoid that path. I stood and looked at each of them in turn. I've packed what I need for tonight. I'll arrange to collect the rest of my belongings next week. I've already said goodbye to the children, though they don't know it yet. Sarah's father cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Andres, we knew nothing about this plan. We were told you were having memory issues and might need assisted living eventually. Nothing about financial troubles or forced placement. I nodded, accepting his statement for what it was worth. I believe you, Robert. This isn't about assigning blame beyond where it belongs. With that, I walked to the entryway and collected my coat. Thomas followed me, his expression a mixture of anger, shame, and calculation that reminded me he was still primarily concerned with his own problems. Dad, wait, he said, lowering his voice. We can work something out. Alone, maybe? Help me fix this, and we'll forget the whole thing." I looked at my son, truly seeing the man he had become. "That's the difference between us, Thomas. I won't forget. I can perhaps forgive someday, but I will never forget that you were willing to rob me of my dignity, my independence, and my financial security to solve problems of your own making." "So that's it?" he asked bitterly. 50 years as father and son, and you walk away over one mistake." "This wasn't one mistake," I replied sadly. "This was a calculated plan developed over months, involving lies, manipulation, and potential fraud. And it wasn't just about money, though that would be bad enough. You were willing to have me declared incompetent, Thomas, to drug me into compliance, to lock me away where I couldn't challenge your control of my life." His eyes dropped, unable to meet mine. "I'm not walking away from being your father," I continued more gently. "I'm walking away from being your victim. There's a difference." With that, I opened the front door and stepped into the crisp November evening. My car was parked just down the block, packed with immediate essentials. Tomorrow, I would meet with Jack to finalize the legal protections I needed. For tonight, I would begin the process of rebuilding my life on my own terms. As I drove away from the house where I had experienced both belonging and betrayal, I felt a complex mixture of sorrow and relief. The confrontation had gone largely as expected. The evidence had been irrefutable. Their reactions had confirmed everything I already knew. The bridge between my son and me had indeed sustained serious damage. Whether it could ever be repaired remained to be seen. But I was driving toward a future where I maintained control of my own life. And for that, despite everything, I was truly thankful. The first few weeks in my new apartment were both liberating and lonely. Millfield Seniors Community offered exactly what I needed: independence with available support. My one-bedroom unit had a small but functional kitchen, a living room with space for my favorite reading chair, and a bedroom with morning sunlight that reminded me of the home Margaret and I had shared for decades. The initial adjustment was challenging. After months in a busy household with children's laughter and constant activity, the silence felt oppressive at first. I would wake disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was and why I was alone. But gradually, I established new routines: morning coffee on my small balcony, afternoon walks around the community grounds, evening chess matches with other residents in the common room. Throughout this transition, Jack remained a steadfast supporter, helping me navigate the legal aftermath of Thanksgiving Day. True to my word, I hadn't immediately pursued elder abuse charges against Thomas, giving him an opportunity to address the situation appropriately. His initial response wasn't promising. "He's called 3 times asking for loans," I told Jack during one of our regular meetings. "Each time the amount gets smaller, but he still doesn't seem to understand that this isn't about money." "What about Sarah?" Jack asked. Radio silence. Her parents called to apologize again and to let me know they've distanced themselves from Thomas and Sarah's financial problems. Apparently, they've been asked for money too. The most painful aspect was the separation from my grandchildren. For the first 2 weeks, all my calls went straight to voicemail. Then, unexpectedly, Thomas brought them to visit one Sunday afternoon. 10 minutes, he said curtly, standing awkwardly in my doorway. "They've been asking about you." Jason and Lily rushed past him to hug me, their questions tumbling over each other. Why had I moved? Was I mad at them? Would I still help with homework and piano practice? "I needed my own space," I explained gently, avoiding blame while not lying. "I'm not mad at anyone, and of course I still want to see you and help with anything you need." That brief visit broke the ice. Soon, we established a new pattern. Thomas would drop the children off at my apartment on Sunday afternoons, returning 3 hours later to collect them. These visits became the highlight of my week, though they were always tinged with the awareness of everything that had been lost. During this period of adjustment, I reconnected with old friends and colleagues, many of whom I had neglected during my time living with Thomas's family. My former work partner, Bill, and his wife invited me to dinner regularly. My weekly golf foursome welcomed me back enthusiastically. The senior center, near my new home, offered classes ranging from watercolor painting to computer skills, providing both structure and social connection. About a month after Thanksgiving, Sarah appeared at my door unannounced. She looked thinner and more subdued than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I gestured her inside, curious about her purpose but maintaining my guard. "I want to apologize," she began, perching uncomfortably on the edge of my sofa. "What we planned was wrong, inexcusably wrong." "Yes, it was," I agreed simply, waiting for her to continue. "Thomas doesn't know I'm here," she admitted. "He's still angry and embarrassed, but I needed to tell you face to face how sorry I am. We were desperate about the money, but that's no excuse for what we considered doing to you." Her apology seemed genuine, though I wondered what had prompted it. "What's happening with Thomas's financial situation?" I asked. She sighed heavily. "He's under investigation at work. Someone reported the irregularities with client accounts. He'll probably lose his job, possibly his license. We're selling the house to pay back what he took." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of sadness for my son's poor choices and satisfaction that consequences were being faced. "And the children? They miss you terribly," Sarah admitted. "Especially Lily. She asks about you every day." We talked for nearly an hour, establishing cautious new boundaries. Sarah agreed to bring the children for additional visits when Thomas was working late. I made it clear that while I was open to gradually rebuilding relationships, my financial independence was non-negotiable. "I won't be moving back," I stated firmly, "and I won't be providing loans to cover Thomas's mistakes." "I understand," she replied, looking around my apartment with new eyes. "You seem at peace here." "I'm getting there," I acknowledged. As winter turned to spring, I found my own rhythm again. I joined a senior hiking group that explored local trails twice weekly. I volunteered at the public library, reading to children during Saturday story hours. I even started consulting occasionally on small engineering projects, keeping my mind sharp and my days purposeful. Thomas eventually reached out, though our initial conversations were strained and formal. He had indeed lost his job, but avoided criminal charges by arranging full restitution to his clients. The house was sold, and they moved to a much smaller rental property. These setbacks seemed to have initiated some genuine soul-searching. "I betrayed your trust," he admitted during one of our cautious coffee meetings. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I don't deserve it. But I am asking for a chance to rebuild something between us, for the sake of the kids if nothing else." "That's a start," I acknowledged, recognizing what happened as a betrayal rather than just a mistake. Our relationship began to heal through small, consistent steps. Thomas would bring Jason for advice on science projects. Sarah would drop off Lily for piano practice on my community's shared piano. We established new traditions, like monthly family dinners at a neutral restaurant location. The most important lesson I learned through this painful experience was about vigilance without paranoia. Trust is essential for meaningful relationships, but blind trust can leave anyone vulnerable, regardless of age. Now I balanced openness with appropriate boundaries, willingness to help with clear limits. I also discovered unexpected strength in myself. At 70, I had completely rebuilt my life, establishing new connections and routines while preserving what mattered most from the past. The resilience I found within myself was something I wished I could share with Margaret, who had always been my greatest supporter. "You were right about so many things," I often found myself telling her photograph, especially about keeping some money in an account only I knew about. That gave me options when I needed them most. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving, we gathered again for the holiday, this time at my apartment community's dining room, which residents could reserve for family events. The dynamics had shifted dramatically. Thomas and Sarah arrived as guests rather than hosts. Their financial situation remained tight, but they were slowly rebuilding with legitimate work and more modest expectations. As I watched my family around the table, I realized that while the betrayal would always be part of our shared history, it didn't have to define our future. The bridge between us hadn't collapsed completely. It had been damaged, then carefully reinforced and reconstructed, perhaps stronger in some ways for having been tested. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my comfortable chair and reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain had been real and deep, but so had the growth and rediscovery of my own capabilities. I had protected myself without hardening my heart completely. I had maintained boundaries without building impenetrable walls. The lesson I carry forward, and would share with others facing family complications, is this: protecting yourself from harm doesn't mean you have to stop loving those who have hurt you. It simply means loving yourself enough to ensure your dignity and independence remain intact. True family bonds can survive difficult truths, and sometimes those truths are necessary for genuine healing to begin. So I ask you, have you ever had to balance forgiveness with self-protection in your family relationships? How did you navigate that delicate terrain? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if this story resonated with you. Your own journey matters, and your wisdom might help someone else finding their way through family challenges. Thank you for listening, and may your own Thanksgiving be filled with genuine gratitude and clear-eyed love.